The next stage in my piano games development is to build a beautiful, functional user interface. If you'd like to follow along on my indie game building journey, then please subscribe to my channel. I'll be documenting my progress each week. There are already some great tutorials on YouTube which mainly cover building simple user interfaces in Unity, things like loading, saving, and level selection. If you're looking for a more standard, roll your own interface, then I'll link to this excellent tutorial by Thomas Brush in the description. These are usually just a few buttons or text elements on a background, which is, to be honest, great for most games, but I want something that works out of the box that can easily be used to apply the same style across multiple different screens. So while I could attempt to create my own buttons, texts, layout elements, or even develop my own UI framework, I think that I'll save a huge amount of time and stress by using a pre-built UI framework. I'm going to be comparing 5 different UI frameworks, some free and some cost money on the Unity Asset Store, and I'll be comparing these according to the same criteria. So number 1, is it easy to get started? I want the framework to be intuitive, and if I can't figure out something, I don't want to have to dig through pages of documentation just to work it out. Number 2, does it look good? The end product is obviously very important here. Does it produce a good user experience? If not, out of the box, is it easy to make it look good? I recently had the dubious pleasure of using a program called SynthFont 2 for my piano synth font comparison video. So let me just play this file. So I'm hoping to make something that doesn't make people's eyes spontaneously bleed. Which leads me to point 3. Is it either fully featured or easily expandable? Does it already have everything I need? And if not, how easy would it be to add these things in? And lastly, point 4. Is it worth paying extra money? Not so important for me at this point, as I've already committed to buying each of these for this video, but this will hopefully be useful for you when you're deciding whether to splash out on a paid framework or whether you can get away with a free option. So here is the mock-up I've made in Photoshop. I've designed a very simple layout which I'm going to attempt to recreate in each framework and judge them against my criteria. We have a background image, a sidebar containing 4 links or 4 simple buttons, and this right-hand area which contains a title, a list of pieces, each with a thumbnail and short description, and then 3 buttons which will allow the user to choose which kind of game mode they'd like to play on each piece. At this point, I'm not worried too much about what happens when you interact with each of these elements. That part will come in a future video. I'm just going to attempt to create everything in this simple mock-up, test that it works, and see how good it looks. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I've got a new Unity project, just a blank scene here. So our first test was, is it easy to set up? So let's go ahead and download it. And then import it into the scene. Okay, so let's see what we've got. Go to our project window, but we've got a Fairy GUI folder here now. Let's try the README. Alright, okay, so let's place a UI panel on the scene. Let's press F to focus on it. There it is. Alright, let's try a sample scene. So examples and then scenes. Okay, so we've got a scene now with a UI panel, example content scalar script, and 2 cameras. Okay, let's run this and see what it looks like from the game window. Okay, so it looks like I can click on the different buttons and it's got a nice little animation, a clicking animation, and then a scrolling animation for taking you to the next screen, and then a back button which takes you to back to the main screen. So let's go back to the scene. Download the editor from fairygui.com. So maybe I have to use the editor in order to change this scene. Let's see if we can make a UI. Create button, that sounds promising. I've got 2 buttons here. See if I can duplicate them. Yes, I can. Alright, so let's have a look at our mock-up. We want 4 buttons: home exercises, my pieces, and composers. We won't worry too much about alignment right now. Okay, so we have the left-hand navigation. Obviously there's quite a bit to do in terms of alignment and polishing, but the main features are there. So I'm happy with that for now. The next step I'm going to test is getting it back into Unity. Okay, so it looks like we've published our package. Let's check it out. Can't for the life of me work out how to export this into Unity. It seems like when I try and when I click publish, it seems to say package 1 success, but there's only this one C# file in the package, and as far as I can tell it is empty. So I've just found this Very GUI in Unity Setup Pixel Perfect, an article on medium.com. It says that you need to publish the component into the Unity project folder, which is perhaps the step I was missing. So I've been using Very GUI for over an hour now, and whilst it was going pretty well with the editor and I was able to create the buttons and the components I wanted, as soon as it came to trying to export that and import it into Unity itself, I was getting problems and errors and I was just struggling. At the moment I've got a load of console errors which seem to be to do with missing resources, but I can't work out where they are or how to locate them. And which folder they should be in. There's not a huge amount of help online either, so at this point I'm going to say I might come back to Very GUI depending on how the other tests go, but for now I'm afraid it's a big red mark against the first requirement I defined, which was, is it easy to get started? I would say probably no, maybe I'm doing something stupid and it is easy to get started, but for me I found it very difficult. So I'm going to move on to the next option. So our next contender is Marklights, Unity Presentation Framework. This one is also free, and I'm excited to try this one because it seems to have some HTML features, which might not be for everyone, but I do have some experience using HTML, so let's see how this goes. Let's download it. Okay, so we have a fresh project with Marklights imported. Okay, so I've added the view presenter script to a empty game object. Okay, we've got some nice animations here. Looks like there was a few little glitches, but the sliders are working. We've got a text entry, button with no text on it. Alright, that's a good starting point. Okay, so I can't work out immediately how to edit this example, but I have managed to find this getting started tutorial. Unfortunately, the Marklights documentation is now offline. Be careful if you click on the link in the asset store page because it's now owned by some kind of spam site, but somebody helpfully linked to a Wayback link which allows you to access the page. So I've given Marklights just about the same amount of time as I gave Very GUI, and the results have been much more substantial. I've managed to create an interface with all the elements that I wanted. There are a few things that I haven't quite worked out. The alignment is slightly off and this list of pieces is going below the canvas, but these are all things that I expect I will be able to fix given more time. The things I like about Marklight are that it's very similar to HTML. There is like an XML format, so if you've ever coded HTML or written a website in HTML before, or if you're familiar with XML, then you'll understand how this all works. You create nested regions, groups, and then you can put your buttons and your lists and images within those. Once you've saved the XML file and go back to Unity, it will automatically update with any new elements you've added in the XML file. And then when you click to run the scene, you get these extra highlighting animations, and you're able to click these elements and select the list elements, and obviously these buttons are all standardized. So going back to our comparison criteria, in terms of getting started, if you have prior experience with XML or HTML, then it's going to be very easy for you to get started. If you don't have that kind of background, you'll struggle more. It's not a drag and drop interface, it's very much code based, which I'm happy with, but you'll need to bear that in mind if you start using Marklight. Does it look good? It doesn't look great, but it looks good enough for me for the time being. I know that you can add background images, you can add animations to make it look better. So out of the box, no, it's a little bit rough around the edges, but I think that it is extendable and it will be possible to make it look good. Is it fully featured? I think that it has all of the elements you'd expect. Certainly if you've used HTML, it has all of the list elements, the image elements, the layout elements you'd expect. It doesn't have much by the way of animations or more advanced user interface features, but for my purposes, I think it probably is adequate at least. And then on the cost front, obviously this is free, so that's a bonus. Next up, we have Simple UI from Unruly Games. This is the first paid for pack. This one's priced at €7.14 or about $8 US. I have a feeling this one is going to be more of a UI theme rather than a UI framework. So I guess this will really be the Unity UI framework that we'll be using for this test. Okay, so we're importing the Simple UI package. So it looks like we have a Simple UI folder here with a samples directory. Let's try the home screen. Let's have a look at what it looks like in the game view. Honestly, I'm struggling to see what you actually get with this package. It seems like there are a limited number of fonts, some images to help with layout, I guess, along with the PSD for the whole thing. There's a very small set of resource icons, which I guess is useful if you're building a resource-focused game, and the corresponding vectors, and then some sample scenes, and what looks like quite a large pack of vector icons. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and build the interface with just the Unity framework. I might use some of these vector images whilst doing so, and we'll see what we get at the end. So I've spent some time making a rough approximation of what I'd like the UI to look like. As far as the Simple UI package goes, there's not a lot there, to be honest. So what I've done is I've created some standard buttons, some panels to organize my data, and this scroll view element to list the pieces. If we go into the game view, there's nothing fancy, no hover animations or anything, and just a standard default scroll view. So in terms of our criteria, 1, is it easy to get started? Yes, if you've got experience with the Unity UI features already. 2, does it look good? Honestly, for a paid UI package, it doesn't look as good as I'd expect. You could probably achieve a similar kind of thing just with your own backgrounds and the default free Unity UI features. Number 3, is it fully featured? No, I think it's unfair to compare this one to the others because it is just a set of icons really. Personally, I was expecting a little bit more, but having said that, if you're looking for a cartoony look to your menu, this one has some pre-built backgrounds and fonts and icons that you can use straight away. Is it worth paying the extra money? No. Honestly, I would stick with the default UI and just create your own backgrounds or find some online for free. Next, we have XML Layout, which is slightly more expensive again at €26, which is about $29. I'm expecting this one to be very similar to Marklight. It's using a code-based approach with separate style sheets similar to what you do with HTML and CSS. So again, if you've got experience in those areas, then you'll already have a head start. I'm expecting this one to have much more by the way of support. The other one being free meant I think it'd been abandoned by its devs, but this one seems to be well supported. There's lots of documentation and lots of examples. So let's download it, import it, and see what we can do. Okay, so we have a blank scene again in a brand new project. let's see what we've got. We've got a UI folder, and we've got two folders under that, table layout, and we've also got XML layouts. So let's try XML layout, see if we've got any samples. It looks like we've got a list of options here. Let's go into the game view, see what it does. Okay, so we've got a nice layout here with some highlighting on hover and some tooltips by the looks of it. You can also change the color scheme on the fly. Okay, let's have a look at the structure back in the scene view. So we've got a main canvas object with a background image, some sort of color scheme manager, and then this looks like the main menu with a table layout parent. Okay, let's start with a new scene. Let's generate this layout. It looks like it's created a canvas and a nested XML layout object. And here is the XML layout script. We've just got the parent XML layout elements and nothing in there at the minute. Okay, I'm calling time on this specific test. As you can see, it doesn't look quite as good as some of the other ones out of the box. I think that's mainly because I haven't played around too much with the layouts file yet. I've created everything from this XML sheet. Everything's generated automatically. Looking at the documentation, it looks like there's a lot in there. There's a lot of fine control with the layouts, and it's possible to create a style sheet type thing, a CSS type style sheet, and apply it to multiple views, multiple layouts at the same time, which is definitely an attractive prospect. Looking through the documentation, there's a lot of elements that I've not touched yet, and there's a lot of animation and configuration that you can do to make it look better. Looking at our comparison points again, number one, is it easy to get started? I would say it's easy to create the XML file, and it automatically generates the elements and creates some basic animation around that. In terms of the second point, does it look good? It looks okay out of the box. It's not very flashy. I feel like there's a lot you can do though. Moving on to point 3, is it fully featured? I would say yes, it seems to have a lot in there. I just wasn't able to access it in the short amount of time I was able to play around with it. Is it worth paying the extra money? Now this is a difficult one because we also compared Marklights, which is a very similar kind of idea, similar kind of XML based layout, and automatically generates the elements for you. But it looks like you do get a lot more with the XML layout options. There's a lot more documentation and it seems to be actively supported. So it's a tricky one. If you've got 25, 26 euros, $29 to spare, and you are worried about support, if you're using it for a professional application, that might be important. However, if you want something free, then maybe Marklights is the better option for you. Okay, and now we're moving on to the final framework we're going to test, Unity GUI. This is quite a big jump in price at 58 euros or about $65. So let's get stuck in and buy this one. So apparently to install Unity GUI, you also need to first download this DoTween. So let's do that. Okay, so we have DoTween installed, we have Unity GUI installed, everything imported, and we have a fresh Unity scene to play with. By the way, I've looked at the Unity GUI documentation and I've not read it all, but it looks like it's much more extensive than the other ones, as you'd expect at this price. If you look at the documentation link on the Unity Asset Store, then it takes you to the text documentation as well as this tutorial section. There's quite a lot of YouTube videos showing you the different components and how to use them. So that's a big plus point for me. So let's have a look what we've got in this Unity folder. Let's press play and see what it looks like. Okay, so let's create a new scene and see if we can get started ourselves. I'm going to try and create the same template again that we've been doing for each of these packages. Looks like a nice feature they've got here is both the manual and the YouTube video linked directly from the component. A nice feature is that you can edit the button label within the button object itself, so you don't need to drill down into the label itself. You can just click on the button and it has this label, which makes for easy changing. So we've got each of the components of the canvas based loosely on my Photoshop mockup. On the left hand side we've got our first panel, which has 4 buttons, each of them using the Doozy UI button element. And then in the center we've got another panel which has 2 elements. It has the text header and then a scroll view with a vertical layout group containing several buttons for each of the pieces. And on the right we've got a third panel which is anchored to the right hand side and has 3 Doozy UI buttons for the practice options. So let's take a look at how it looks in the game view. So very similar to the other packages I've tried. You've got your list here, pieces which are selectable and they're highlighted. You've got your standard buttons on either side. Obviously, as with the other ones, there are opportunities for cleaning this up, and I'm sure I can make it look a lot better given more time. And I'm not using any transitions or animations with this view. So one thing also worth mentioning about Doozy UI is this Node feature, which allows you to define the flow of your navigation within the menu system. So if I move this out of the way for a second, you'll see what I mean. I've got the UI view I created here, but then below that I've also got a new UI view. If I click play, I can now navigate between them by clicking on any of these buttons. It's just an example to show you how the navigation system would work. So if I click any of these buttons, it will take me to the blank new screen. Normally using Unity's standard UI framework, you'd need to write some code to handle these button presses, but using the Node plugin, then you can do it visually like this, and each view has its own node, and you define what the buttons in each view do and where they link to, things like that. It's just a nice way of seeing it visually, I guess, and might make things easier in the long run. For anyone deciding on which framework to go with, I'd first ask whether you prefer the idea of managing your interface in XML code. If so, then look into Marklights and XML Layout. If not, then ask yourself whether you can see your UI going beyond a few simple screens. If you're building a standard game with a load, save, and main menu screen, then you can probably get away with using Unity's built-in UI framework, perhaps adding some art assets from the Unity store if you want to find a particular visual style. However, if you can see your game growing beyond a few menu screens, then Doozy UI's Node navigation tool will more than likely help you manage the flow through these pages, and the other built-in tools will probably save you time in the long run. Personally, for me, originally I was really attracted to the XML frameworks, but having used them, I don't like the fact that there's an additional layer of abstraction and that you're relying on the framework to accurately turn your code into game objects and items in Unity. I can foresee a situation where it doesn't do exactly what you want, and you have to dig through the code to find out why it's processing in a certain way. I think that sticking to the Unity native UI framework is a safer way to go, while using some of the tools provided by Doozy UI to manage the navigation flow and transitions between menu screens. Next week, I'll be documenting my process and actually building the first version of my full UI, so please subscribe if you'd like to follow on, and I'll see you there.